Hi, Lou here with another entry in the Confusions of Game Design series. In this case, confusion between player tension and player frustration. One is desirable, the other is not. Tension is what's desirable, frustration is what's not. But they're not so different. One person's tension is another person's frustration and vice versa. Tension is part of hobby game playing, though not so much of party and family games in general. Tension is related to winning and losing. It's about success and failure, but also about what happens next. Some dictionary definitions. Tension, the state of being stretched tight. Mental or emotional strain. Frustration, the feeling of being upset or annoyed, especially because of inability to change or achieve something. Now, Wikipedia's discussion of this is interesting. Frustration is a common emotional response to opposition. Related to anger and disappointment, it arises from the perceived resistance to the fulfillment of individual will. Once again, tension is desirable for many, frustration is not. Frustration happens when players cannot do what they want and don't accept that that is part of the game. It's not part of game playing. It can also happen when players don't succeed and some will blame the game. If it's regarded as part of the game, then it's okay. And what's regarded as part of the game has changed over the years, as I'll talk about later. People nowadays really dislike constraints, even though they're surrounded by them. They prefer not to have constraints in games, even though games are just a collection of constraints. Where does frustration come from? When someone plays a game, they may be thwarted by four sets of circumstances. Other players, tough decisions and opposition. The game system, tough decisions, maybe opposition. The game interface, clunkiness, lack of control, and other factors. Another way to list this would be frustration with other players, frustration with the game mechanics, frustration with the interface, frustration with other factors. And when I say frustration with other players, I mean because the players are opposing them, not for reasons of personality clash, which I put into other factors. As for tension, think of people who like to have adrenaline running through them. They seek out tension, or at least invite it. For example, sports coaches and athletes, and also many hobby game players, though fewer in the past as more party game players play hobby games. And there's been changes of view in what's regarded as frustrating and what isn't. It's the age of comfort, after all. People are taught never to be uncomfortable. There's the invasion of party gaming and hobby gaming, both video and tabletop. What's generally regarded as acceptable has changed. For example, getting lost in a role-playing game is no longer regarded as acceptable in many quarters. Losing a turn is not regarded as acceptable in games because people want to always be doing something. Secret doors in RPGs are regarded as a dirty GM trick instead of part of the game. At this point, the Chinese curse came to mind. May you live in interesting times. Some people don't really want to when they play games. In some quarters, aggression of any kind in itself is regarded as unacceptable. Aggression in the game. And so games like war games are just right out. People don't even want to know about them. So the question is, what's your target market? If your target market is hobby gaming as a whole, then you need to consider what's frustrating to people today and avoid it as much as possible in your games. Unfortunately, that tends to lead to games that are bagatelles or pablum. So many video games, for example, hold the hand of the player that they end up not opposed games at all, even though the computer can try to provide at least a semblance of human opposition. Many games are more like playgrounds than like the old opposed games. perhaps the most important thing to remember, what's not frustrating to you may be frustrating to your market. Thanks for listening.